Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of Thrasher Opera House Presents, our great podcast here on Spotify and YouTube. And I'm talking with Grant Gordy from Mr. Sun. They've got a show coming up with us here at Thrasher on Friday the 13th here in Green Lake, Wisconsin. And we're so happy to have Grant along with us. Good morning, Grant. How are we doing today?
Good morning, Jason. Doing great and feeling very lucky despite the date. Very lucky to get to be there at Thrasher.
We're excited to have you on. And let's talk a little bit about Mr. Sun, first of all. How'd this all come together?
Mr. Sun is a wonderful experiment in kind of community in some ways. Joe K. Walsh, the mandolin player, and I particularly grew up as enormous fans of this kind of progressive string band music that some people describe as newgrass or new acoustic or dog music or whatever. I became obsessed with David Grisman's music when I was sort of a teenager, as did I was living on the West Coast at the time, and Joe was going through the same obsession at the same time in his life, and so that is all to sort of lay the foundation for the fact that we both got really, really excited about this music. Came to know each other later as young players, just kind of out there on the festival scene, and we both, of course, revered Daryl Anger, our violinist, from afar. Certainly, in my case, for a long time, I had pictures of Daryl and David Grisman up on my wall as a teenager. I was completely just besotted with that music. I went on to play in David's band in the David Grisman Quintet for about 6 years, and when I moved here to New York, Joe and I started working more together because he lives up in Maine, and Daryl was kind of in our orbit at that time, and we just started kind of tightening our orbit until we formed this little band, and eventually Aiden, our bassist, who's a fantastic, highly regarded jazz bassist who lives here in New York as well. Eventually, he joined the band, and it's been this. Um, Membership of this particular quartet for years and years now.
There was string bands, and but the show here at Thrasher is unique in the fact
It
that
is.
you as a string band have decided to take a former Russian ballet that was reimagined by the great Duke Ellington, and now you reinvent it for a string band. The process
As one
behind it,
does.
yeah, right. The process behind that. Has had to be very incredible. Talk a little bit about how you rolled into it, even.
Incredible is a good word for it. And it started, I think, with a simple, genesis, which was just that all four of us are enormous fans of that record, the 1960 Duke Ellington, Billy Strayhorn collaboration. Duke Ellington's Nutcracker. I can't even remember exactly what it's called, but Duke Ellington plays the Nutcracker Suite. It's been just a classic sort of in our universe, all of us individually and collectively for a long time. And it was definitely, everybody gets tired of Christmas music after a while, and this was one that every year it comes out. We turn that one on. It's so great. Like in our respective homes, we listen to it. So anyway, we're just such huge fans of that record, and at some point, I think Joe had the idea of like, well, why don't we do our take on that? We have this concept of, you know, Duke and Billy Strayhorn reimagined this incredible iconic music by this incredible iconic composer, and they reimagined it in their own image of sort of the music the cultural context and all the music that they were dealing with at the time, and the swing and the dynamic that you get with a big band group, which obviously in that particular big band group being so special. And we sort of said, well, why don't we kind of do the same thing where we're going to interpret their interpretation. And we got a grant from the Fresh Grass Foundation to be able to record and put it together. So we had on the record we have like ancillary parts with other musicians, and so there's, for example, the do do ba 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 in our hands has turned into almost like a mandolin orchestral thing with like 17,000 mandolin players on it, and it kind of started as this very simple little seed of an idea, which why don't we do this thing, and then just tumbled into the sprawling piece of work that it is now.
It's one thing as a fan of the record from Duke Ellington to appreciate it, but then to reinvent it as you guys did in kind of an avant-garde way. Um, as a musician, I imagine that has to be like the pinnacle of what being a musician is all about, right?
It was a total delight, and it was so fun to have this vehicle of like, okay, we have these parts that we're working with, these, you know, um, we have the original piece, we have the it's being put through this prism of the kind of mid 20th century jazz perspective, and that so important to us as musicians, even though we're a string band, but we have such we're also steeped in a lot of different kinds of music, and particularly, we all love jazz, and so, then, so we already have this great sort of raw material to work with, and then we have this flexibility to sort of reimagine it in whatever way we might think we could possibly pull off. So everybody, each one of us took a couple of the pieces and did our own arrangements, and some of them we would try to hew a little bit closer maybe to what they were doing in the Ellington version. Some of them we might have just tried to stick a little bit closer to some of the original Tchaikovsky parts, and some of them were just kind of completely deconstructed and reconstructed, and that's sort of the wonderful trust that we have of each other as musicians too, that everybody was able to just kind of have their way with it, and we sort of just tried to do the best we could with all those decisions.
Yeah, we're talking with Grant from Mr. Sun. They're going to be performing their version of Duke Ellington's Nutcracker here coming up on Friday the 13th at Thrasher Opera House. Get your tickets at thrasheroperahouse.com. Outside of the Ellington stuff, let's talk a little bit about Mr. Sun and the music you guys create as well. Talk about the composing and the work that you've done.
Sure. We've all brought in a lot of original music over the years. We've been a band now for over a decade, amazingly. And so we all have stuff that, Daryl has some of his classic tunes that certainly Joe and I have been listening to since we were teenagers, as I mentioned. And so on our first record we recorded one of Daryl's pieces called Key Signature, which was, that was like, I don't know if you have any, like, just classic piece of music in your particular, life that was just like one of the things that most got you excited about, maybe the instrument that you play or just music that you're into, but that tune in particular was one that really fired me up, and so it was really great to get to sort of reimagine that, with Daryl. And anyway, so we all bring in original music, and we try to write specifically for each other as instrumentalists. And also Joe brings in a lot of great songs. He's done he writes songs, and he also has brought in like poems that he's set to music. That's been a really fertile source of songcraft for him. And yeah, so we've got two records now of our original and some newly interpreted music. We've got the Nutcracker record. We're planning to do some more recording this winter, and we just did a little band retreat a couple months ago, where we worked on a bunch of new music together that we're all writing. And so we're chewing on new stuff all the time. We're emailing ideas back and forth, and we all live in different. Aiden and I live in New York, but Joe living in Maine. Daryl now lives in Nashville, so we can't exactly get together and rehearse once a week, but we get a lot of mileage out of messages and emails and sending ideas back and forth. And then when we get together, we squirrel away little bits of time that we can develop new stuff together. And part of it is because we've been playing so long, we have just a chemistry that we can kind of fall back on all the time that is really valuable for us. Even if we're working on new material, we can kind of, it might be less familiar than other stuff we've played before. We can always kind of find ways to make stuff work, just because we can, use our sort of extrasensory perception with each other to find our way through confusing moments when need be.
So that's a great way to describe that. It's if anybody's ever been in a band at the dynamic of, that's a great way to really describe what that's all about. Well, Grant, we're certainly looking forward to having you all come in on Friday the 13th here at Thrasher Opera House. Safe travels as you head out on the tour here, and we'll see you in just a little bit.
Thanks so much. We can't wait for the gig.
Appreciate it.